When I was young, I went fishing with my dad and my best friend. We waded through some deeper water to reach a shallow sandbar where the fish were biting. It was quiet and peaceful. We stayed out there for quite a while, casting lines under the hot sun, surrounded by nothing but water, sky, and occasional splash of a mullet. But the tide began to shift. Slowly, the water that had been just above my ankles crept higher and higher until I was waist deep and it was still rising. Then, in an instant, the entire world snapped into focus. A huge shark, 7, maybe 8 feet long, exploded through the school of mullet, thrashing to the surface just feet from where I was. The water was panicked as the fish scattered. I froze. We all did. My dad, my best friend, just standing there in the sudden silence, mouths hanging open, staring at the space where the predator had just torn through the water. No one screamed, no one ran. My dad, calm but deadly serious, said, "Walk back, slowly, slowly, don't splash." So we did, but the tide had came in more than we realized. My dad and friend were taller. They could still manage the deeper water. For me, though, it was another story. The stretch between the sandbar and the shore was now over my head. I couldn't walk anymore. I could barely bounce off the bottom. The water reached their chest, but I was gasping just to keep my head above the surface, one hand gripping my fishing rod awkwardly overhead, while the rest of me flailed beneath the waterline. I was completely helpless. We all knew that the shark was still circling somewhere in the murky water behind us. It could have been 6 feet away. It could have been inches. I couldn't see, couldn't move fast, could barely breathe. It felt like a nightmare, like one of those dreams where you're trying to escape something in the dark, but your legs won't work. Except this was real. There was something in the dark, and it had teeth. Even then, I knew the odds. I knew it was unlikely that the shark would come after me. It was hunting mullet, not people. But if there was ever a moment I had been attacked, that was it. As a kid alone in the deep water, barely able to stay afloat, splashing just enough to draw attention, surrounded by bait fish and blood scent. A few years later, just a few miles away, a man was killed after jumping off his deck right into the path of a bull shark chasing mallet. So yeah, I knew the odds, but I also knew the water. A few years ago, I went with my then girlfriend to the beach. We were boogie boarding from the first sandbar back to shore. It was during the week, and the place was deserted. No lifeguards, no other swimmers, just us. We were alone in the surf for what felt like a quarter of a mile in every direction. She was riding a wave back to the shore, laughing, her board cutting through the foam. I stayed back, facing the open water, watching the horizon. I was trying to read the waves, looking for the next good one to ride back. That's when I saw it. Fins. More than one. A shark, maybe 20 yards from me. It cut through the surface of water like knives, gliding in and out of sight between the swells. No splashing, no thrashing, just quiet predatory movement. My stomach turned to ice. I waited for the next wave, heart hammering, trying not to move fast. When it came, I didn't hesitate. I rode straight back to the shore, every second expecting a surge of water behind me or a flash of gray below. I didn't want to scare her, so when I reached the sand, I just said, "Hey, let's go hang out under the tent for the rest of the day." My voice came out steadier than I felt, but she saw right through me. She knew. Without me saying a word, she guessed exactly what I had seen. I didn't get a good enough look at it to know what kind of shark it was. Sand shark, bull, tiger, maybe even a hammerhead. It didn't matter. When you see a living missile of teeth and muscle pointed in your general direction, you don't stick around to identify it. You get out. The ocean is the shark's territory. I've always been taught to respect that. But seeing that fin, seeing it glide so close, in silence, made me realize something else. How many times have sharks been there and I didn't see them? How many shadows have passed beneath me, just out of sight, in all the years I've been swimming? That thought still freaks me out more than the fin that I did see. Growing up, my grandma used to babysit me. She lived with my uncle, and he had a Rottweiler, big, powerful, but always friendly. She was kind of the dog you didn't have to worry about until you had a reason to. One afternoon, when I was 9 or 10, I got into my head that I was going to pretend to be a pro wrestler. I wrapped my arms and hands in white masking tape, like I'd seen on TV. I spent the next hour slamming stuffed animals into an imaginary ring. When I got tired, I grabbed a few action figures and was wandering outside the carport. There, where the deer stands are stored and where the Rottweiler usually slept. She was there, curled up, fast asleep. I sat down a few feet away and started playing. Everything was quiet, peaceful. Then I heard it, subtle at first, just the sound of a dog stirring. I didn't even look up, but then came a growl, low, deep, not playful. That was when I turned around and froze. The Rottweiler was staring at me, her eyes locked onto me like I was prey. Lips curled, teeth bared. The growl got louder. She wasn't wagging her tail. She wasn't coming over to sniff me. She was tense, watching, hunting. I tried to talk to her. It's me. I barely was able to get the words out. I stepped back slowly, hoping she'd recognize my voice, but she didn't. Or maybe she did, and something in her didn't care. Then she lunged. It happened fast, muscle and teeth lunging forward, eyes wide with something I didn't understand, but now recognized as pure instinct. And I swear, in a split second, I realized what she was aiming for. My arms. The tape. I ripped off the masking tape as fast as I could and threw it at her like it was something cursed. The moment it hit the ground, she stopped. Just stopped. And I ran full sprint back into the house, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't go near that dog for days. I barely breathed in the same direction as that carport. Then out of nowhere, I got asked to feed her. I opened the door, heart in my throat, and she was wagging her tail like nothing had ever happened. Just like that, back to friendly. But that day never left me, because for a moment, a terrible moment, I wasn't a kid playing pretend. I was prey, and I saw up close what it looks like when something you trust suddenly doesn't recognize you anymore. Or worse, it does, and still chooses to go in for the kill. I was stationed in Japan 3 out of the 6 years I was in the Navy. During that time, I leased a traditional Japanese home. The shower was in its own separate walk-in with a deep sink tub, wooden bench, the whole deal. It was honestly one of my favorite parts of the place, until this morning. I stumbled into the shower half asleep, barely conscious. As I shut the door behind me and stepped towards the tub, something black flashes past my peripheral vision, followed by an immediate thud. I looked down into the tub. There it is, a huntsman spider the size of my goddamn hand, legs spread wide, motionless, just staring up at me like it's been waiting, watching. I freeze. Best guess is that it had been on the wall behind me. I must have startled it, but now it's between me and the rest of the room, coiled like a nightmare. Instincts take over. I grab my shower head from its mount, it's on a hose, and aim it directly at the thing. Flush it down the drain, whatever it takes. As soon as the water hits it, it leaps, not crawls, leaps straight out of the tub onto the wall and bolts it for the window. It moves like it's glitching through reality, faster than it should have been possible for something that size to move. I try to throw the window open, but before I can even touch the glass, It jumps again and runs under the shower into the powder room. Now I'm naked, concerned, soaked, and breathing hard while this demon spider waits for me on the cabinet door outside. It just sits there, like it knows it's baiting me. I make a run for the front door, grab a flip-flop, creep back into the powder room, and wing the sandal at it with everything I've got. Direct hit. Legs go flying, but it's still alive. It limps out of the bathroom and disappears under the stairs. Slower now, wounded. I'm done playing games. I grab a can of bug spray, push down the nozzle, and start moving in for the kill. That's when I see it, curled around the back edge of one of the stair treads. There's this black, twitching tail. I think it's a spider. I aim, spray. But what drops isn't the spider. It's something else. A Mukade centipede, longer than my forearm, black and red, shiny, armored, and it charges me. Not scurrying away, charging. The front half is raised off the floor like a cobra, mandibles clicking, biting the air. I don't scream. I'm just about to pass out. I stumble backwards, unloading the can of spray, trying to stay on my feet as this thing comes at me, like it has blood in its eyes. I hit it again, still moving. I turn the flip-flop on its edge and use it like a saw, cutting the thing in half while it thrashes under the pressure. The second it stops moving, I remember the spider. It's still alive, still under the stairs. I blow air into the gap and it runs out, fast but stumbling. I raise my flip-flop saw and smash it, hard, until it stops twitching. Then I just stood there, soaking wet, naked, trembling, heart pounding in my throat, surrounded by venom and legs and parts of things that should not exist in the same place as a shower. And then I screamed at the top of my lungs for about 30 seconds straight. The whole battle lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt like I spent a year in that house. By the time I got to work, I was so visibly shaken that my coworkers stopped what they were doing just to ask me what the hell happened to me. Honestly, I still can't tell if it was the worst morning of my life or the most badass thing I've ever done. I did field work back and forth between the US and UK and East and South Africa for about 10 years. In that time, I spent a good portion of my life living in remote base camps, hours or even days from the nearest town. Out there, you're in the wild's domain. You stop being on top of the food chain, and every so often you get reminded of that in a way you'll never forget. These are some of my oh shit moments. The first was an elephant, a female with a calf. You don't really understand how big an elephant is until it's charging you. The ground doesn't shake, it thunders. Dust, screams, the sound of breaking branches, all of it rolls over you at once. Knowing she had a calf made it worse because there's no bluffing in a charge like that. She wasn't posturing, she meant it. Then there were the big cats. I know for a fact that I was stalked at least twice. Once by a leopard, easy to identify because it's the only large predator at that site. The other time, most likely a rogue male lion. That lion was known to hang around the area. You don't see them, of course, not at first, you just feel it, a prickle along the back of your neck, the sense of eyes in the dark. Sometimes you catch a flash of movement in the brush, a low rustle of grass behind you where there shouldn't be any. And then you remember you're not tracking it, it's tracking you. The next was in Alaska. It was a day off and everyone else had gone into town. I was sitting in the main tent, reading, when something made me turn around. A moose cow with a calf 5 meters away. If you've never seen a moose up close, you don't understand how massive and unpredictable they are, especially a mother with her young. They aren't big dumb deer either. They're unpredictable and they're faster than they look. But the one that still wakes me up at night happened in South Africa. We had a party the night before. Someone forgot to close the kitchen door. I woke up hungover, stumbled into the sink to make coffee. The rubbish bag was right beneath me. I heard something moving inside. I bent over and saw shifting. A Mozambique spitting cobra, its head low, slightly flared. One wrong move, one startled breath, and I'd be blind or dead. Then there were the hyenas. Two spotted hyenas broke into the camp one night, killed a few dogs, and started nosing around the tents, mine included. You don't forget the sound of a hyena's womp when it's right outside your tent. It's deafening. It makes your bones feel hollow. And then, a noise I didn't even know existed, the low growl that follows. When it's that close, that sound doesn't come from outside. It comes from inside you. I've got dozens of other stories from the years, but none of those have ever made me feel the same raw, primal certainty that I'm not in control here. I could die right now, and nature wouldn't even blink. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at my babysitter's house with her kids. They had a smallish herding type dog, supposedly gentle and sweet, supposedly. But their son? He was a nightmare. He chased that dog around with a Nerf gun, tackle it, pin it, scream in its face, basically tormenting it every chance he got. That kind of relentless, cruel chaos only kids can generate. And the adults did nothing. Not even a word. Just let it happen like noise in the background. I was 7. I couldn't do much, and honestly, what made it worse was this wasn't even the worst abuse that happened in that house. The dog was just the most visible victim, so I stayed quiet. Then one day I was just sitting there. A fly was buzzing overhead, nothing dramatic, just a fly. The dog was nearby, and of course I didn't think anything of it. Then I heard this growl, low, tense, and focused. Not at me, but through me. The next thing I know, there was a blur, a violent, suffocating blur of fur and teeth and heat of breath. The dog latched at my face snapping, snarling, and in a split second, it was on me, not barking, not nipping, mauling. It went for the fly, but it got me instead, and it took part of my upper lip. I don't even remember pain, just confusion, terror, blood, and its face in mine. Hot, wet, angry. We never found the missing chunk. Just gone, vanished. I've always told people the dog bit me because that's the simplest way to explain what happened. But honestly, I think it ate a piece of my face. The worst part is, I've been afraid of these dogs ever since, which is embarrassing, right? Being afraid of a tiny herding dog? But the fear doesn't care how something looks. Fear remembers the feeling of the breath, the fur, the snapping teeth inches away from your eye. The second worst part is, I kept hanging out with a babysitter's kid after they gave the dog away. Then, a year later, they told me they actually gave them to their cousins. They told me this by taking me to their cousin's house without any warning, without asking. Just casually walked into the home where the same dog was, saying it was retrained. I don't remember how I reacted. I just remember staring at the dog across the room and wondering if he remembered me too, if he recognized my face, or what was left of it. I'm from Florida, and I was volunteering at a local nature conservancy after a big storm had torn through the area. One of our jobs was to remove fallen logs that had jammed up in the creek. The creek was about chest deep, 15 feet wide, and completely opaque, a thick, tanning stained brown that swallowed all the light. You couldn't see an inch beneath the surface. Typical Florida freshwater, but still deeply unsettling when you're standing in it. I was moving logs, shoulder deep in water, when I suddenly noticed a shape on the embankment. A massive, motionless 12-foot alligator. It had been there the whole time, and I hadn't seen it. Then it moved. Without a sound, it slid down the muddy bank and disappeared into the creek, into the same water I was standing in. Gone, no splash, no bubbles, just silent. It was like the swamp swallowed it whole. I turned to the land manager, who was still hauling logs beside me, and I asked, "What do I do?" They barely looked up. "Well, those logs aren't going to move themselves," one of them said. "That gator probably just trying to get away from us." Probably. So I stayed. For 30 minutes more, I stood in that water, blindly feeling around with my legs and hands, moving logs that were the same size, shape, and color of that fucking alligator, knowing full well that an actual alligator was somewhere beneath that surface, inches from my legs, maybe watching, maybe waiting, maybe gone. Every bump against my boot, every sudden tug of the current felt like it was about to become something else, something with teeth. It was one of the most nerve-wracking, skin-crawling things I've ever done. And the worst part? You never hear them coming.